Welcome to Rewiring Health, where you'll find a combination of science and spirituality to reclaim your health and realize your worth. I'm your host, Kelly Kessler, and I'm on a mission to help you stop self-abandoning and start embracing yourself. Join me as we dive into heart-centered, authentic conversations that not only will inspire you, but help you unlock a whole new perspective. You are here for a reason. Now let's dive in. We can so easily get caught up in these patterns of feeling responsible for others' emotions, feeling drained when we're around certain people, feeling like we can't speak up for ourselves, or just feeling like we're not grounded, like we're just allowing life to push us in whatever direction that we end up in. And that is why I'm so grateful to have Lisa Erickson on the podcast today. In this conversation, she shares so much value in how we can really tune into our energetics to allow ourselves to heal and feel empowered from the inside out. Lisa Erickson is an energy worker and meditation teacher specializing in women's energetics, sexual trauma healing, manifesting, and energy work for daily life. She is the author of Chakra Empowerment for Women and The Art and Science of Meditation, both published by Llewellyn Worldwide. Lisa is certified in mindfulness meditation instruction and trauma sensitivity and has trained in a variety of energy healing and somatic modalities. This was such a great conversation, and I'm so grateful for everything that Lisa shared and how we can really tune into ourselves and allow ourselves to experience this life and our personal reality in a whole new light. Well, welcome, Lisa Erickson. I am so honored to have you on the podcast today, and I can't wait to dive into what we're going to get into today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what drew me to you was what you do and the kind of things that you work with. And I really felt like it would so much serve people who listen to this podcast. And before we dive into everything, do you mind sharing your story and what brought you to this type of work?
Well, it's interesting. There's kind of two phases. One was when I was first starting out in my career, which was actually in technology, my initial career. So that's 37 years ago now, and in New York City. And I was experiencing stomach aches and headaches that the doctors could not figure out a cause for. And although this was unusual at the time, one suggested a meditation class, which were not as common then. And the one that I happened to find was actually an energy center or chakra meditation class. So that started my journey into energetics. I stayed in my corporate career for another 12 years, but I was studying a lot. What really prompted me to dive especially into women's energetics was after my first daughter was born. So this was now, I was 38, so I had kids relatively late. And I experienced health issues that I'd never had before. And so that really caused me to kind of go deeper into the energy medicine, you might say, side of things. So it started out kind of a stress management, turned into almost more medicinal beyond stress management. And that has kind of fueled my whole journey.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because we can often experience these ailments and not even realize maybe what the root is. And can you talk about that? What you discovered as you went into the work a little bit more, especially around the pregnancy, what was going on within your system?
Yeah, I mean, on a certain level, what I had was gallstones, which are not unusual. It took a long time to figure that out and finally get surgery. But why it had come on in the way that it did, and then what I really realized is symptoms that I'd been ignoring in my body and a pattern of doing that. So the illness had this other messaging for me around ignoring, not tuning into my body, ignoring what was occurring for me. And it eventually turned into pancreatitis and all this kind of things. So it really shifted me a lot in terms of my approach to my own health and self-care, boundaries, being able to take time out for myself, all of which I sort of thought I'd already learned working through this journey in my corporate career, but parenthood took it to a whole nother level, as it does, especially for many women.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to get right into it because a lot of times we hear the word energy, and I find that when we don't understand it, I either have energy or I don't. And that's kind of like, we think of energy as this ability to do all the tasks that we need to do or not be able to do that. Can you talk about what energy is and how it really applies to our lives?
Yeah. Well, stepping back, coming from this perspective of being an energy healer, energy worker, everything is energy, and that includes our physical things that we experience, emotional, mental. This table is energy. It's just the atoms are closer together than the atoms in my water or in the air, right? That we know everything's energy. So just kind of extrapolating off of that, even when we're feeling tired, that drowsiness is an energy.
Mhm.
We are in this certain state of energy. So when you start to view it this way, oh, it's not a lack of energy, it's a certain kind of energy. And stress is a certain kind of energy. And being inspired is a certain kind of energy. When you start to think of it that way, you can start to think in terms of energy work in a way, like how do I shift my own energy? And of course, there's physical components. You may be tired. There's a level of physical fatigue is because you didn't get enough sleep or nutrition or things like that. But there's all these other factors, how other people's emotions impact you. What is your stress level? Are you running at this very high level of cortisol so you're continuously crashing? So those kinds of things you can really begin to look at. And with kind of the work that I do, which is contemplative energy work, like tune into different energy centers, you can actually give yourself little boosts. You can learn how to tune into a certain energy you need more of in time. It's not in a moment. It's not replacement for taking care of your physical body, but it's another level that you can work with.
Can you extrapolate that a little bit longer, like her further? Like, what does that look like, and what is that? How do we do that for
Yeah.
ourselves?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different methods. I primarily work with what's called the chakras or energy centers, which are these different centers that align in the center of your body. And, there's very simple ways to just learn to focus on them. Some of us are very visual. Some of us are very sound helps us. Some of us like affirmations, right? Focusing on a certain energy center and saying that affirmation of, okay, in this moment, I'm maintaining my boundaries. I'm centering in my power. I'm holding my navel as I do that because this center in our belly is associated with kind of focusing. It's associated with the fire element. So this side of ourselves that has that feariness, which sometimes you may need in a moment.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's what you need. So you can be like, okay, in this moment, I'm about to go into a meeting where I need to really project confidence. I'm feeling really drained. I need a little navel center infusion. And you
Mhm.
can just visualize a little candle flame there in your belly and do some affirmations to try to inspire that feeling. If you've been practicing, right, a little bit at home, you'll begin to be able to feel that and bring that energy forth. Or
Mhm.
maybe you need balance. Maybe you're feeling stressed. And what you actually need is just calm yourself down. We all know the breathing techniques, right, for kind of calming yourself down, but you can add to that centering in your heart, centering in your root chakra at your base of your body and affirming your safety. So there's all these different ways to kind of augment your tools to bring about a shift.
I love that. And then do you mind talking about the chakras a little bit further? Like, what
Yeah.
are the chakras? What do they represent? Just for anyone who hasn't maybe been exposed to that or isn't aware of those.
Yeah, yeah. Just at a high level, I like to think of the our anatomy like we have a physical anatomy, we have an energy anatomy that intersects with that. And that energy body or energy anatomy, you can think of it as like this intersection between your physical body and your emotions and your psyche, your and your spirit, if you want to go that far. But linking with the emotions, when we feel emotions, we feel them as kind of an energy, right? Like the feeling of anger, if you tune in to your body and what it feels like, very different than the energy of contentment, right? Or the energy of an inspiration, feeling fired up, ready to just go work on something, right? Very different energies, right? So we know this. And this is just another level of that. The chakras are like the organs in your energy anatomy. They're like the stomach and the heart. They're like the major organs. And once you know what each is responsible for, what parts of your physical body and what emotions they're linked to, you can work with them to empower certain energies that you need more of based on what you're experiencing. So I can go through the seven main ones. I don't know if you want to go in that level of detail, but that's
Yeah, I would love for you. Yeah, if you don't mind just sharing what they are and how they show up maybe in just in our lives. I would love to
yeah.
hear more about that.
Okay, good. And just pause me if you want to stop on
Yeah,
any one of them. So,
absolutely.
There are different chakra mappings, so I should say that up front. But the one really in the West that people are the most familiar with, or that maybe you would find a picture of hanging on the wall of your yoga studio, for example, would be a 7 chakra mapping, or 7 energy centers that are kind of aligned up the center of your body from your tailbone to the top of your head. And just going through them fairly quickly, and I'll focus more on the emotional part.
Mhm.
The root chakra, which we would usually focus like on our tailbone for that, maybe your feet, but this one has to do with feeling safe
Mhm.
and feeling present. So when we're anxious, we're usually not feeling that, right? So this is one you're often working with if you're feeling anxious.
Yeah.
And our sacral, our second chakra is in our pelvis.
Mhm.
And it is linked to our reproductive system and energy medicine. So very potent one for women often. Linked to our cycles, linked to our emotions, uh, linked to creativity. It's linked with kind of this more fluid, inspirational kind of energy, as along with sensuality and sexuality. The navel center, sometimes people focus higher up in the stomach. I like to focus closer to the navel, but it's that whole navel area, the stomach area. That third chakra is linked to boundaries, confidence, personal power, feeling centered in yourself, feeling yourself, you know. Um, Big one for women. Big one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heart chakra, as you can imagine, in the chest, linked to our relationships, our ability to, feel love, but also to receive it, to receive support. Also one often for women, maybe we're the caretaker, giving, 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 and actually not able to ask for the support we need or to receive it even when it's offered. So there's that whole component of the heart chakra.
Mhm.
The throat chakra, as you can imagine, in our neck, linked to expression, authenticity, honesty, but also being able to both speak and express here also, like
Mhm.
really interact with people in an authentic way, um, in a way that's not people pleasing. Like people pleasing is more like just saying what people want to hear, right?
Mhm.
To try to feel safe, but be authentic expression, really speaking your
Mhm.
truth, another big one.
Yeah.
You can see how they're all interrelated, right?
100%.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
the sixth and seventh are more spiritual. The third eye in our forehead, often linked to kind of meditation and spirituality, but it's also linked to wisdom. So it's like when you just need to center and be like, okay, what do I really think is right here?
Mhm.
There's sometimes the answer is not a pros and cons sheet, right? It's like
Mhm.
there's some inner voice that you're trying to connect with. And
Mhm.
that is linked to the third eye, that discernment. And then the crown chakra at the top of our head is linked to spiritual connection. But really, beyond that, it's linked to a sense of purpose and meaning. Like, what do you value? What gives you a sense of purpose in your life? What gives you a sense of meaning? I think is what we can draw on that one, even from a secular perspective.
Mhm.
So you can see how this is really the building blocks of all the different aspects of our life, and it can become this framework for what do I need more of, you know?
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those. It just gives, everyone so much clarity of like, okay, what are we talking about here? And as you're speaking, like you're going through each of that, I'm like, man, a lot of those just seem like a lot of things that people who listen to this podcast struggle with. And if someone's listening and they're saying, well, I feel like I'm really struggling with each one of those. What does that maybe indicate? And what would be the next step for someone who's saying, like, all those are what I really desire in life to feel like I'm living authentically, that I'm grounded in myself, I can
Mhm.
trust myself. How do I get to a place where I feel that and how do I navigate that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's important to decide what's the top priority in the moment. And maybe I think if it's low energy, right? If it's I have no energy, or I feel no sense of purpose in my life, you're going to kind of decide which is the most important, and you could start there with focus on that particular chakra, right? As an augment to whatever other personal development work you're doing, right? Like you probably have other things that you're doing, but it gives you a focus point. I'm going to focus here first. I need to focus on sense of purpose first, then maybe you're going to focus on crown. I'm going to focus first on my energy levels, my stress levels. Maybe it's going to be root chakra, trying to feel safe.
Mhm.
Energy levels, maybe it's going to be navel chakra. Maybe I feel like I'm taking energy on from other people. Again, maybe navel chakra. So
Mhm.
it creates a framework for that. And there's a lot of, if someone wants to add just simple chakra meditation to their personal development toolkit, there's a lot of meditations available in apps. And then there's my stuff, right? Which we'll, we'll get to
Yep.
at the end. I do have some free stuff posted on my website too.
Mhm.
But I think it's also stepping back and asking why. What's the larger patterns?
Mhm. Absolutely. And is it a matter, I've heard that, like, is it a matter of them being blocked or what's actually going on? Like when someone said, like, hears, are like, oh, I may have a blocked chakra. Can you explain that? What does that look like? How do we know if our chakras are blocked and what do we do about it?
Yeah. I mean, blocks really, how do you know? It's what you're experiencing, right? You kind of can use the what you're experiencing to tell you where you are the most blocked. What are those blocks? It really, I like to think of them within a Western psychological model of there's imprints, limited beliefs that you're limiting beliefs that you're holding, your conditioning, right? And so that creates a pattern. It creates a pattern that doesn't serve you in some way. And what you're really trying to do is rewrite that pattern. So I think less in terms of clearing blocks and more in terms of let's create a new pattern because you also hold positive patterns in your energy body. And when you're especially feeling discouraged with everything that's wrong with you, which can easily happen, you sometimes have to remind yourself, oh, okay, but also like I'm really good at expressing myself in this setting. And actually, I'm really good at holding my boundaries in this setting. And I'm really good about exercising. So that's a kind of root chakra thing. You do have good patterns built in there. And now we're trying to take the ones that are holding you back in some way and rewrite them. So maybe it's a boundary pattern. You feel like you're always drained around people. Well, to me, I'm going to be like, okay, probably you're taking on a lot of energy, other people's emotions. What's the
Mhm.
feeling behind that? Were you raised to feel responsible for other people's emotions? Do you feel like no one will like you unless you do this? Is it, do you feel, did you grow up in a home where you never felt quite safe? Like people were angry all the time. So you developed a pattern of trying to calm everyone down to stay safe. Now that's habitual, but it means you're using a lot of energy up on that. So social interaction is always tiring for you. Then we need to work on rewriting those patterns that you're not responsible for how everyone else feels. And if
Mhm.
there's conflict around you, you actually can stay present with it, but you're not responsible for it and you don't have to solve it for everyone. And that may be root chakra work, that may be throat chakra work. You get the idea. It becomes
Yeah.
psychological. It's often a good augmentation to therapy that someone's
Mhm.
doing or
Yeah.
other work,
Absolutely. Thank
which
you
is
so much.
like
That's
coaching.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And your
Yeah.
examples are, I'm sure resonate with so many, like feeling that responsibility that you have to fix everything and take care of everyone. So it's really helpful just to see like how these patterns develop and how we can use this as another tool to help ourselves release that. And is there like a daily practice? Like, I've heard cleansing our chakras is something we need to do on a daily basis. So I'm like almost like a shower where we need to cleanse our energy. Can you talk about that? Is that true? And how do we do that?
Mhm. Yeah, there are different methods. So I would say, yes, it's great. Like all good patterns, sure, that's a great one. Just
Yeah.
like, exercising a certain number of times a week and this and
Mhm.
that. But do what you can do, right? I think working with women in particular, we can end up with so much shoulds that
Mhm.
even self-care starts feeling like another thing you're not doing enough of, right? I'm sure
Absolutely.
you probably talked about that on your show.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yes, my answer is, would it be good to do it every day?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it better to do it at least once a week? Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So do what you can do. And I like to work, there's different models, and if you Google chakras, there's crystals you can put on your different parts of your body, and there's breathing techniques, and there's a lot of them. I focus a lot on, like I mentioned earlier, like focus on the chakra and a certain visual of light there, and then affirmations to try to feel that new state. And the reason I like this is that it is something you could attach to another habit, like when you're
Mhm.
taking a shower or when
Yeah.
you're brushing your teeth. And that's something that I do a lot. Like, okay, when you're in the shower and that water's coming down, I want you to also imagine lights pouring into your heart and refueling you. And
Mhm.
you can just build in these little things. You're brushing your teeth, you're about to leave for the day. That's the last thing you do before you go out the door each morning. we're going to focus on the boundary tool that I have that is kind of navel and root chakra. I'm setting up this nice boundary to maintain my energy all day. So that's what I like to work with is, are there ways you can build in these empowerments in your day? And then, yes, if you have time to, at the end of the day, do a sort of meditation on all of them, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, because I think that's so helpful. I'm such a huge advocate for building it in, because we know exactly what you're saying, and you get so bombarded with all the things you should be doing that it just is counterproductive at that point. So I love how, you provide those examples of how you can actually build this in, and it doesn't feel like an overwhelming thing in your day. And I know you've talked about women's energies. Can you talk about the difference between men's energies and women's energies, and how do we approach each differently? Because oftentimes it all kind of gets clumped together, but is there a different aspect to men and women's energies?
Yeah, there really is when you go into kind of the traditional teachings in different spiritual traditions and energy medicine traditions, because the energy body is linked to the physical body, right? So there are differences. But just like with the physical body, there's this spectrum. So when we say women's energy bodies, men, it's this spectrum, and there may be women who feel like their energy is more masculine, and what I mean by that, or men that feel like theirs is more feminine, is in general, the feminine energy body is more receptive and absorbent. We actually take on more energy from our environment by default. And then we could have conditioning factors that contribute to that, like we already talked about, feeling responsible for others, etc. And in general, men's energy bodies are a little bit more solid. Now, the plus of having a more sensitive energy body is we do have a natural intuition or sensing of what's going on with people, maybe more naturally. So it's a pro, it's not always a con, but it can be a con if you're taking on others' emotions and not realizing they're not yours. And that is very exhausting, right? So in general, with women, I'm working usually a lot more with boundaries, and with men, I might be working more with opening up. With women, I might be working more with feeling safe and stable in their energy and their body, and with men, more with feeling fluid, right? So that, that is kind of the range, and you can see where you fall on that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So helpful. Again, just understanding ourselves. When we understand ourselves, then we can move forward in a better way and have these tools to navigate that. And one other thing I know that you talk about is trauma. Do you mind sharing that? And how do you navigate that? And what are some ways that you help people navigate trauma and healing?
Yeah. Well, when we have experienced trauma or abuse or really dysfunction, especially in our childhood environment, we develop coping mechanisms. And then those coping mechanisms helped us get through. But at a certain point, then in our real life later on, they may actually become some of those limiting patterns we're talking about, right? So we talk about these responses to danger: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all of these things. When we talk about them in terms of trauma, they're patterns that develop to help someone cope with things that felt like you couldn't cope with it in the moment. But then if they become habitual, maybe it means for example, if you have a habitual fight pattern, whenever you feel unsafe in any way, threatened, disrespected, you fight, you start an argument, push people away, right?
Yeah.
Or you flee. You
Yeah.
get out of the situation, which means, you don't sort of stand your ground and say what needs to be said because you flee, right? Or you fawn. You go instantly into people pleasing, which is another way of not speaking what you need to say, right? So or freeze. You just become paralyzed. You can't even think of what you want to say, right? In a conversation because someone has said something disparaging. You're not in physical danger. Your cognitive mind knows you're not in physical danger, but this feeling of not being safe from the past and the coping mechanism you developed is habitual. That's all we're dealing with, right? So we're trying to rewrite those patterns. And the big one we're always dealing with someone who's experienced any of those things is safety, first and foremost. And that's root chakra, first chakra. Can we bring more of a sense of this default of safety rather than not safety into the body and into the energy body? So we do a lot of root chakra meditation and work. And that's one where I would say, can you do this every day when you're brushing your teeth, right? Like trying to repeat it over and over and create this new default.
Yeah, and for someone who maybe is feeling that like lack of safety, can you share an example of like how you would work with someone to cultivate that safety, especially if someone hasn't felt safe in their body for maybe years?
Yeah. I think first we are just going to do root chakra meditations. And sometimes we imagine we're like bringing ourselves back down if we feel like we kind of disconnect from the body and bringing it down. We're actually using our hands for anyone listening. I'm reaching up and bringing my hands down and being like, I'm here, I'm present, I'm safe in the body, and try to get that feeling. But then on the other hand, we're working with memories of situations, current situations I'm working more with because we're focused more on the rewriting than going back into the trauma. Like, what's a situation now, recently, where you feel like that got triggered? You really felt anxious. Your cognitive mind is going, I'm actually safe. You know, I'm in the supermarket and someone got too close to me. I know they weren't actually trying to hurt me, but my body went into anxiety. And we're going to work with that memory and kind of rewrite it, rewrite that memory. And again, we're trying to repattern that mind and that energy body and connect to that root chakra. The hope is eventually, in that moment, you're able to notice the dysregulation that's occurring. And you activate in the root chakra because you've been reinforcing that at home when you were safe. At a certain point, you'll be able to make that shift in the moment. It happens over time. It takes patience, right? But it can be done.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. It just helps, for anyone who maybe is feeling that way of, okay, like, okay, what are the steps? What does that look like? And how can I maybe reestablish hope and feeling differently if maybe they haven't in a long time? So I really appreciate you sharing that. And um, would you be able to share a transformation story? I always find that when we hear the stories of people who maybe have struggled with something, they go through these practices and then they come out in the other end and experience life and themselves differently, how empowering that is for someone who maybe is just starting out. So do you mind sharing a story that's really empowering that you've with someone you've worked with?
Yeah. Yeah, just recently, someone I was working with that I hadn't, we had worked together a lot a few years ago, and then I hadn't heard from them a while, and then we reconnected. And this is kind of common. They had experienced an abusive childhood, and had been, in that sense, their coping mechanism that had developed was a real withdrawing from the world, a real sort of constrained, limited life, because that's what felt the safest. And they had such a longing for more connection and being able to make new friends and move out into the world in a new way and speak up at work. So that's what we were working on. And they did meditate already, and they really liked bringing in some chakra work. And we worked a lot with the root chakra. We worked a lot with the throat and the navel, their ability to express. We rewrote a lot of memories of things that would occur. And, they really over time became more vocal. And what I was so proud to hear is that they had recently gone in and asked their boss for a promotion that they long felt they deserved, right? And they just hadn't been able to work themselves up to say it. And they did it. And their boss was sort of like, oh, I didn't even know you were interested in that. I didn't really think you wanted, right? So it's that classic example of her perceiving it as kind of an external holding back, but in fact, her boss's perception was she didn't actually want more. So as soon as she spoke up, she actually got it. Now, of course, it doesn't always work that way, but she might not have been met with a positive response, but it still would have been a positive thing to say, to be able to say what she wanted, right?
Yeah.
Was a huge step for her. And to move into that more, it was a job that involved a lot more engagement with people and to feel like she knew she could do that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. It is just to see those steps where it's like when our internal world
Mhm.
is evolved, how our external world then evolves from that. So thank you so much for sharing that example. And I would love to hear, what does your daily routine look like? How do you take care of yourself and honor your chakras and your energy each day?
Yeah, I do meditate each morning, and that's a
Mhm.
long-standing practice, and it is also kind of part of my own spiritual
Mhm.
practice tradition. So it's beyond energy care. But then throughout my day, because I do see clients, right? I am before each client, I'm centering in my heart chakra because I want to meet everyone with an open heart. And I'm establishing my boundary, which is essentially I'm a container, but I'm not taking on whatever I hear from who I'm working with. And
Mhm.
then afterwards, if I feel like maybe I started to take on the energy rather than simply holding the container, I would focus on my navel and
Mhm.
imagine I'm clearing that out, or really, it's not even imagining. I can feel it. I can clear it out at this point, right? So those are kinds of things that are built right in to my day.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's so helpful because like to have that routine, I mean, I know when I was working as a physical therapist, it was like patient after patient after patient. I was feeling exhausted. I had no idea because at that time I had no awareness of my energy. I just knew I was tired. But
Mhm.
I appreciate you sharing that because so many of us do work in professions where we are working with many people, and especially if you're someone who absorbs it, how do you navigate that? So I appreciate you sharing those practices and understanding that you can go through that without feeling like you're completely drained at the end of the day and have to do this whole upheaval of feeling like you can get your energy back. So that's
That's such a great example
yeah.
because I've worked also with a lot of body workers,
Hmm.
masseuse, et cetera, and exactly it's that, and it's something it's a skill. You
Yeah.
really can learn to manage your energy in a new way. It takes time, but that in and of itself, I hope is an empowering message, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have to just be this way, right?
Yes.
It can take time. You can learn to work through it.
Yeah, it is empowering because that's something, like I struggled with years ago and I had no idea. Like I've come a
Yeah,
long way, but I had no idea. And I was just getting to the end of the day and feeling like I am completely exhausted. How am I supposed to muster up energy to see another 8 or 9 people tomorrow and then do
right.
it again the next day? And it's like we
Let
often.
alone go home to kids or whatever is going on.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. And
Yeah.
then take care of yourself and life. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's that constant, you're on a treadmill you can never keep up with. So it's so empowering to hear like, okay, you don't have to just exist and try to survive each day, that there are practices that can really help you through that. So
Yeah.
really empowering. And for someone who wanted to work with you, where can they find you and connect with you?
Well, my website is enlightenedenergetics.com. And on Instagram and Facebook, it's Chakra Empowerment.
Mhm. Amazing. I'll put everything in the show notes for everybody
Okay.
listening, but I am so grateful for everything you shared. This really, I think, will be very eye-opening to many people who like maybe have never been exposed to this. I know when I had heard of chakras, never understood it for a long time, and then the more I got into it, it was just fascinating and how you can apply it to your life. So I'm so grateful for everything you shared, and hopefully just plants that seed of like, here's another tool you can use to navigate any situation in your life. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly, for your great questions and for bringing this forth, and especially for women to really be diving into just energy and all of that. So needed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's these things that, you don't realize how much you have with
Mhm.
available to you and within you to really create a different environment and a different perspective. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If there was something in this episode that really resonated with you or a message that stuck with you, please share it with someone else. It's only through sharing these messages that we can start to rewire our minds to feel empowered and live the life that we truly desire. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to Rewiring Health.